Yeah, I think what it does is it gets you to the platform quickly, so then you can start assessing what workloads you're going to move to. Because it's you're going to have an environment that's going to give you the platforms that you need for both cloud as well as app dev from a Staccato perspective. But I think at the same time, the movement of workloads to the system itself is part of the service offering. It's trying to accelerate that adoption.
That begs the question, is this an automated work? Is this workflow for moving the workloads to the system can be automated? So I can just say, hey, push a button, tell me the best workloads? Or do I have to have some sort of human intelligence involved with this process? Because if I do, that just makes it longer and longer and longer and political. And I need proof one way or the other.
Well, I think there are tools which are used to judge the maturity and the portability of the application itself or your application portfolio. So there's something that HPE has, it's called Aura, which is some IP that's unique to HPE. And what that'll do is it will go through and it will test against your application portfolio to see which applications could be just rehosted, moved from current state into the Cloud System 10. But there's also some interpretation of anything that's not immediately compatible to say, does it need a refactoring, which means you have to do something from an API perspective to bridge it to a cloud environment. Or you may even have to look at what happens if you need to do some kind of re-engineering of the application itself. So it's not just instantaneous, but there is an idea that says these are the apps which are most compatible, which could have an immediate impact for a movement to cloud system.
I have a couple of questions. The CI/CD workflow, is it contour CI or pseudo implementation? That's question number one. And the second question is, what is the difference between cloud system and cloud suite management?
Yeah. So in the first case, the CI/CD workflow is something called the module is called Cloud Engine, and that is its own thing. It's very much of a cloud native, Jenkins, GitHub oriented, and it's very much kind of trying to get you past kind of your roll your own for a good solid kind of CI system. So when we think about Cloud Suite, so Cloud Suite is our larger product offering where Cloud System 10 is really kind of the first incarnation of what you're going to see. As we move forward into future versions, it's going to be Cloud Suite.
Can you talk about Cloud System and Synergy and where those two might come together or not? Because I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, and Chris Purcell and I were just having this conversation already. Unfortunately, there's not a lot that's understood about this, which I think is a missed opportunity for HPE, but the opportunity that comes from that composability, especially as we start talking about private cloud, is immense. Can you talk about how that kind of fits in with Cloud System?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we look at Cloud System 10, which integrates into the Synergy system, it's starting to use the OneView APIs and some of the composability features. For those of you that are not familiar with the Synergy system, it allows you to ask for different configurations of, in essence, of hardware. So whereas if you buy just a standard, rack-mounted system, each machine is a very specific configuration, and that's what you got. But within Synergy, you can actually say, I would like more compute, more cores, more networking, or less. So those are exposed to a set of APIs, which then the underlying cloud system can then work against. One of the things we think that gives us is if you look at a public cloud where you have different machine types, if you're going to go by different names or anything, but different capacity pools. You could have a memory-oriented machine type versus a database-oriented machine type. Synergy allows us to build different capacity pools, different types of machines, so that for a private cloud customer, they can start to have some of those efficiencies that you get with getting the right kind of machine for your application need.
But these are still two hardware stacks, two different hardware stacks.
No. Cloud System 10 works on Synergy. It'll also work on the non-Synergy, the converged C700s.
So one of the questions John had asked this morning, John, I'll ask for you if you'd like to ask about.
No, go ahead.
So one of the things we talked about is SMBs in cloud, and Jeremy, maybe this might be better for you. But John was, giving an example. He runs, you said about 130 customers, something like that. What if he wanted to move off the cloud he has now to move into the Helium world? What would be the steps? What are the advantages? If I remember correctly, that was Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you. My question is this: right now, I run the entire Microsoft stack, Windows up and down the stack. What does it Helium hold for somebody like me? I'll say I just stepped out of a Stacy's pod and I wanted to use your products, moving away from Azure, and I want to try out Helium for my business. Would I have to relearn all over again? Would I have to come to would my business then have to be Linux based? What is there? How easy would it be for me to guide my operations using your product as a stepping stone to the cloud?
Yeah, I could do that. So especially from a composed system like cloud system, you have compatibility against any of the platforms which you may currently use. So if you're using System Center and Hyper-V, for example, to build out the virtual machines, System Center through CSA is going to give you that compatibility, but it's still going to enable as a control point and a control plane with Helium OpenStack at its base.
How granular can I get into your products, right, without learning the finer points of how OpenStack as it works for you is? I mean, because as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, most of the finer points of managing or implementing or orchestrating with OpenStack lie in the fact that it's a Linux-based solution. Is that correct, or am I missing it completely?
No, it doesn't rely on the fact that it's a Linux-based. In fact, our Cloud System 10 uses Hyper-V, and so we have many customers that run Microsoft Windows images using OpenStack like that. The second thing that you can do is we've enhanced Cloud Foundry. This is stuff that we did about 6 months ago to make it more compatible with Windows and Windows type workloads. So Cloud Foundry up until this point had been very, very Linux oriented. So we did a good bit of work to make it work on Windows machines and to make it work more closely within the Windows development IDEs and source code control systems.
I have a question on that particular topic.
Yep.
Is the Cloud Foundry implementation
Sorry about this. We want to show what
is the Cloud Foundry implementation on Windows based on the Woohoo acquisition? You acquired a company called Woohoo.
Yes, that's right.
So is it based on that? And that's the question number one. Question number two is the code related to Windows merged back into the core of
So the Uhuru group that we did get was some of the really good Windows expertise that we had, and we contributed that code upstream. I did a keynote about a year ago where we talked about all of that, and then there's been a process for that.
So, yeah.
One more microphone.
Leave it on that side. Hey, Stephen, I'll just pass this one back to you.
Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry.
I have a two-part question. The first actually goes back, I don't know if you mentioned eucalyptus at all anymore, and where that does or does not live. Okay. So I'm just curious, I mean, when you got eucalyptus, it seemed like a nice potential bursting way to have an Amazon-compatible on-premises solution that bursts up into the Amazon cloud. So just would love an update on that. And part two of the question was, during the keynote today, there was a lot of talk about HPE's machine learning platform living up in the Azure cloud, which seemed to look like a poster child example for why HP doesn't need its own public cloud. You're just going to turn on these great services on third-party clouds. How much more momentum can they expect around that? So part one was eucalyptus, part two is sort of more HP-type solutions running on Azure or other clouds. Thank you.
So when the... Try this.
You gotta get close.
I can do both. So
On the eucalyptus side, eucalyptus is alive and well, heavily inside HP, or HPE. The way that the eucalyptus works, though, is kind of a little bit different, right? In terms of most customers who are consuming Amazon and are big users of Amazon, right? There's a couple things that they look at that they just can't necessarily do in Amazon. So for either reasons of data sovereignty issues, or certain workloads can be pretty expensive in Amazon in really large volume. Certain aspects around data, also certain aspects around sort of your business, right? If you're a big Swiss bank or others, your customers may not really want all their private wealth management out in a public environment. But those customers who have bought into the Amazon or the Azure premise, they're interested in consuming an offering, not necessarily purchasing it themselves, standing it up in their own infrastructure. So Eucalyptus actually now lives in the enterprise services organization inside HP. And most of the customers who purchase Eucalyptus are really purchasing it through a managed private cloud offering.
Got it.
So they're consuming it that way. We still have a number of very, very large Eucalyptus customers who want to run it all themselves, and they still can do that and they still sell it that way. But that's mostly where Eucalyptus lives.
So you said replacing enterprise services. What happens after the spin-off?
It'll still live in enterprise services, and there are product groups inside HPE and EG and software and cloud that consume part of Eucalyptus. I mean, we're both going to be selling each other's products. Right? And then I'll let one of my other colleagues answer the larger cloud aspect, but I will say that we have products in HPE software. If you go and look in the Amazon marketplace, you'll see a whole bunch of HPE software products that run in the Amazon marketplace that are available in the Amazon marketplace. Similar offerings in the equivalent in Azure. But Mark or Tom may have more to add to it. I don't know which one works. Use both.
Okay. This works. So yeah, maybe just a little bit more to add to what Franklin said. We certainly we're offering more and more services in the public cloud, and as I think everybody knows, we shut down our public cloud last year. That really is not our go-forward strategy. We're really much more enabling enterprises within private clouds. We're working to offer more and more of the HP software assets in our own Cloud System 10 and our own products like that. So you'll see more and more of that over time. And I think that's really, those are the two vectors for people to consume those services.
What do you see?
We're trying to fix it.
Testing.
Yes.
You about to go. So,
He's good.
universal translator. Sorry. I know it's tired, but when you look at the cloud right now, where HPE is, and with both composable and hyperconverged, do you see any of those systems taking primacy over the other when it comes to use and ease of use for SMBs? I had a good talk with Howard earlier on today about hyperconverged for SMBs. With composable, would that be geared towards larger businesses, or would small businesses be able to gain some benefits from it?
So I think there's always some gain especially if there's a small business has a particular set of workloads or applications that they want to design for. So being able to acquire specific to that design, but having a common management structure across those composed systems is always going to have some benefit. I think where this is going, though, is being able to look at the application, and the application can dictate the composition through manifest or through a container or whatever, what design their destination environment should take. And ultimately, that kind of infrastructure as code or software-defined infrastructure from the application layer is going to be more geared towards something that a corporate one type space or enterprise space customer is going to have the complexity to take advantage of. So that may sound like a consulting answer, but realistically, I think that there's an advantage in the small, but not as great as you'll find in the enterprise.
And building off of that, will HP be delivering templates, if you will, or whatever, or best practices that would help people decide or come to make decisions on what sort of applications would be easier to compose, so to speak, on your devices?
Right. So I think so you were talking about applications. So there's a couple different things that we see coming out. And one, going back to Cloud Foundry and Staccato and other things again, we see a huge demand now in terms of certain industries, certain verticals who are really capturing or trying to take advantage of that kind of agile development approach to accelerate their application into production. So they are going to take advantage of when they're building their apps designed for a certain presentation method, where they can go public with it, they can go private with it, they can go managed with it, based on the demands of the application that they're developing itself. So yeah, I think that the application space by industry, there's a lot of trends we see, and we'll have models which are designed for telco. We'll have models which are designed for finance, which is where we see significant traction in PaaS today around Cloud Foundry and around others. And then we'll follow with certain best practices or models around. We see a lot of traction in engineering today around automotive or manufacturing. Retail now is getting involved very heavily. Almost anything that has grown through acquisition and has multiple business lines that have diverse development environments and diverse infrastructure platforms, we see both composable as well as our cloud system and the work we're doing around Cloud Foundry and PaaS driving toward that business. And we have advantages if we can introduce predictable models. So that's part of the plan.
Thank you. One of the things that I know that is of interest to a lot of, especially small and medium-sized businesses, is from a compliance perspective, right? And so with the release of HOS3, we actually took and made a real determined effort to create a matrix that shows how HOS3 is like PCI ready. Sorry. Helium OpenStack. Sorry. Sorry, everybody. So Helium OpenStack is, and it's always been relatively ready, but with Helium OpenStack version 3, we actually took and went through a responsibility matrix and actually had that discussion so our users can better understand what their responsibilities are, what's the responsibility of the operating system, where there's some gray area, and it really is going to depend on your auditor, right? I mean, that's really going to kind of determine the whole focus of however your audit goes. But this is at least a starting point. I know it's a critical concern for a lot of folks that are under regulatory compliance of one kind or another. So this is at least that starting point. We recognize that our customers are looking for that kind of information, and that's the kind of information that we're trying to provide for them.
Thank you. So, big question, guys. I'm sorry.
Guys, one thing to add too, I think compliance is really important because I talked about verticals. So compliance in the financial services industry, bar none. Public sector, the same. So we will see different predictable opportunities or at least predictable models we can bring to the industries. But going back to compliance, it's a key indicator across multiple.
Thank you. You're welcome.
He's got another question. You can get off easy. I'm not going to ask you.
Since you have this nice little compliance matrix, how can you handle breach and mitigation and breach protection as part of that? Breaches are huge, especially in cloud. They can actually be a lot of dollars lost or a lot of dollars compromised, especially for workers. So what are you baking into Helium OpenStack to allow me to know what's happening?
I'll try to give a not complete yes answer to that question and tell you that it's a major concern for everybody, right? To say that we have the solutions or that we have...
When you hold the microphone, don't hold it to the bottom. When you hold it on the bottom, you're blocking it. Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Now we know where microphones.
Maybe good, right?
I used to moderate events.
Oh,
That's how these things work.
User error. So I'll try to give a decent answer, and it's something that we've looked at quite a bit, right? And the answer is that when we are looking at the overall security model, we spent a lot of time over the last 6 months looking at that specifically. The best solution that we have, basically out of the box, is through integration through ArcSight. ArcSight is a great tool that's part of the HPE family. It's basically the cornerstone of our monitoring and detecting and responding security capability within the hybrid cloud security model that we created. And is it the overall answer? No, unfortunately it's not. ArcSight's just a piece of that puzzle. We also have a lot of third-party integration points where you can actually take and either work with one of our third-party partners or take and look at what you have already existing on-prem to figure out the integration points to help you detect and mitigate some of those breaches. I wish I had a better answer for you because that kind of sounds like a BS answer, but that's really the truth. We have to start somewhere, and then as that model becomes more mature, then we'll obviously be adding more capabilities, either natively or through third-party integrations that will help mitigate that even more.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about private cloud specifically. Can we kind of bend the conversation a little bit into how that connects into public cloud? And not, I don't want to go down the cloud perspective, only because I have a very different perspective of what you have put forth. But rather, what I'm more interested in is what integrations exist there. So let me give you an example. I'm a CIO, I'm coming to you, and I'm looking at the portfolio, and I'm going, okay, I've got cloud system, I see eucalyptus, I see composability pieces, I see Azure Stack sitting on top of Synergy, I see, you see where this is going, right? It looks like a smorgasbord of different components, and what's not clear to me is where do they come together, and what is the clear path for me as the customer to choose which path I take? But you may not necessarily be able to answer all of that, but I guess maybe a different way you could answer it, so I'll throw a leaf out there too, which is, what's your strategy behind providing this smorgasbord as opposed to focusing on particular aspects and doing that really, really well?
So let me talk a little bit to the product side, and then I'll hand it over to Tom for some of the analysis and helping people think through it. So on the product side, I think there's kind of two key products right now that kind of help in this multi-cloud world. One is CSA, and the other one is Staccato 4. When they talk Staccato 4, we can build and manage clusters, whether they're on VMware, Azure, AWS, or OpenStack. So the one Staccato instance can manage resource pools in any of those areas, whether they're, of course, off-prem public clouds or on-prem private clouds. And your applications can span those. And the second thing is Cloud CSA, our CSA product, which allows you to build, in essence, the blueprints. And you say, well, I'll deploy my application in various different you can deploy public cloud, you can of course deploy it on cloud system or on the OpenStack. So those are kind of the two things we have from a product perspective that enable an application development environment, a team, to make those choices. And we'll hand it over to Tom.
So I think from a general architecture perspective, what we see happening is people, especially if you're going to have a multi-provider environment like you will have AWS, you may have Microsoft, but you include Azure Stack, which is today's Azure Pack, right? They're moving to Azure Stack and then Azure Public. And you could have KVM and what we do with OpenStack today. There are customers, maybe in different business units or across their environment, they have those. So we're using, in essence, CSA as part of that complex bundle to be able to support across those different environments. The hypervisors still can be unique, the application development against those hypervisors in that environment still can be maintained, but you use OpenStack as basically a provisioning engine. It's going to be able to move those based on what's coming through CSA, for example. So I think it's a combination of those where you're going to see, I think, more and more the use of Helia and OpenStack as a control plane. But CSA today is what's driving a lot of that multi-cloud connectivity and some of the orchestration that goes behind it. But the provisioning engine then is more and more becoming what we're doing with cloud, with OpenStack, to be able to provision those environments and build those clouds up.
Tom, CSA stands for?
Cloud Service Automation.
It's not the cloud security.
So it's all based on cloud service and the automation engine behind it. Being able to deploy and manage services which are based on cloud platforms.
Building on that question, actually, to give you a little bit of background about myself, I've covered the IT channel for decades, and most of my readers on channel E2E, which stands for Entrepreneur to Exit, most of the readers are managed service providers and/or VARs or some form of that. And building on the hybrid cloud example and the SMB example, a lot of SMBs are just getting out of the infrastructure game. They want an MSP to either manage the on-premises stuff and or blend it all. So how many of these solutions are going to give the MSPs a single dashboard to sort of manage what's off in public, manage what's on-prem, and have a great HP logo there on the dashboard to take care of all this in a multi-tenant way, so that if I'm an MSP, I'm able to manage 100 different customers using your solutions without going through a stack of 300 different offers from HP. I mean, I want one thing to take care of it.
Okay, so full disclosure, it's really a bit of nirvana right now to be able to manage across the multiple platforms, okay? It is a destination for us, but today it's more difficult. What we have seen, though, is, at your point, when we talk about managing services which are presented in public clouds or at service providers, today most of what you can get from kind of out-of-the-box management environment is to be able to manage the virtual machine, okay? But being able to manage the workload that may be within the virtual machine and the performance of that workload in a public cloud environment, whether it's AWS or Azure or Google, that is an integration of the tools that provider uses to be able to determine the health and productivity and consumption rates. And then that data has to be reported back into a centralized console area where you can actually manage multiple workloads. Today, we don't have that today. I don't think anybody has that today. But it is an ideal. And I think the closer we get, though, to be able to manage the application and not just the virtual machine or the container, that's really where you get into true hybrid kind of multi-cloud environments.
So I'll give you another example. In the information security world, identity and access management is obviously a big deal, right?
Sure.
And so part of the hybrid cloud story that we've been struggling with for a long time is how do you take and have the hybrid cloud without having 37 different methodologies of identity management? And I'm exaggerating, but if you've done it, I'm not exaggerating, right? And the reality is that it is something that we're working on, right? It's something that we want to understand how best that we can take and provide either a tool, a third-party integration, what have you, that has the ability to manage cross-cloud, cross-environment, cross-infrastructure, so that your users and your administrators don't want to pull their hair out, what little hair they may have left, to try to manage and use those workloads. So, it like Tom said, it is nirvana, right? Everybody wants it, nobody gets to have it, but it is. The best that I can tell you is that we're cognizant of it. It is something that we're working on, and we're closer today than we were yesterday. Maybe that's the fairest answer that I can give.
It's a good question, though. It's demanded every day.
Yeah, so our readers are like,
Yeah, gotta have it.
We know.
So let me add one.
Yeah, I would just add one thing on that. I would use, when they were talking about hybrid, I would probably use the word multi-cloud, because we're talking about across OpenStack and for others.
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely. Within the Eucalyptus AWS ecosystem, when we talk about hybrid just living in there, we're talking between basically private and public AWS instantiation, in which case you can just federate between them and resolve it that way. But the moment you move into a multi-cloud world, that's the nirvana that Tom's talking about.
Yeah,
we're trying to distinguish part of that, given in the broader HPE sense. We have, Azure Stack, AWS, Eucalyptus, Helium OpenStack. So we have a variety of products. When we think about them in this multi-cloud world, that's where that problem is. But within the private public stacks, the differing offerings that HP has, we do that through a set of tools that exist today.
But there are HP software tools which can monitor and collect data from any one of those platforms.
Right.
It's just turning that into a centralized console to better represent that data in a format that's going to make sense for an administrator.
and multi-tenant.
Right, multi-tenant makes it's hard, but the tool sets can be there. It's just a matter of what we're working towards is being able to capture that IP, which is part of HP software and HPE software and drive tool.
We don't have it, but we're thinking about it, and we're thinking about it a lot.
Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, it isn't. I can't say that it's keeping me up at night, but I've spent many hours in the last 3 to 6 months spending time specifically on that particular question. So we're working on it.
Can I provide a little clarity here? Because I feel like there's a lot of different terms that are being thrown on the table and getting intermixed, and they should not be intermixed. So the one thing you mentioned about MSPs and their needs, that's very different than what enterprises are needing and what many of the management tools that exist today have. The only product that I've seen that is heading into private cloud that actually has MSP toolsets is Azure Stack in the current TP. But, I mean, it's the first TP, it's not GA yet. But that's the first step. The second thing is, in terms of building it out for the multi-cloud support, I mean, we saw two products that a couple of years back that actually were heading down that path. Both got acquired, and now both are non-existent for all intents and purposes. So, unfortunately. It would be interesting to see how that goes out, but I would just caution that I think that's a red herring that eventually will not come to create a lot of value. You know, there'll be a lot of energy, a lot of development that goes into it, but not a lot of adoption.
I'd like to add to that I think that in the multi-cloud world, I wouldn't look at one single interface. I would look at picking a cloud based purely on cost. Where do I go based on today's cost and how much it will cost to run that app? Who cares about VMs and containers? No one does these days. They care about the application, which could be 10,000 containers, 20,000 VMs. They don't care. They want to just have it out there. So if I'm picking a cloud to run that workload, whether private or in my data center, whether in somebody else's data center, whether we're using Azure or AWS, I'm going to be picking that on cost. So I want to know how you're integrating cost into this whole picking of a cloud. Whether or not it's eucalyptus or OpenStack makes no difference to me. Where it's going to land, how I'm able to monitor that, how I'm able to guarantee the integrity of that new instance of my data. I could care less about the bits, unless it's an algorithm that I have to protect, then I do care about it. But I care about my data and where it's going to land. I'm going to pick that based on cost. That's the world of tomorrow. That's not today, but definitely tomorrow.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. And to the point, to that point, we actually just commissioned a report. Should be released in the next 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, that will address exactly that issue, exactly. Because we're thinking about that specific issue. If you are trying to pick a cloud, what is the TCO in going to that cloud? In cloud economics. Specifically, very, very deliberately looking at that topic exactly.
So more than having a report, what I would want as a user, when I am doing it, what is the best thing that's going to match my needs in terms of cost? It should be more dynamic, more real time, and I should be able to do it in automatic rather than more than a report which you need a human to read and interpret and design and then push the workload. I should be able to do it in real time in a more autonomic fashion based on the need for my application at that time, based on the cost of the different clouds at that time. So how are we going to ensure that?
To build a cloud selector?
Yeah, something like there are so many cloud ability in the space. How are you going to integrate that into what you have and make it easy and more automated?
Yeah, so we don't have any products. We don't. That's better. Okay, Mark, thank you. So we don't have anything today in our core Helium suite that does kind of the cloud ability, cloud economics, and cloud modeling. I think where we're going to be going is continuing to partner with people like that and other folks, and kind of watch this channel for future announcements.
Yeah.
At least 4 that I know of that do this today. Please don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
It's just a waste of your time and our money as customers and future customers.
Yeah, very big on partners.
Yeah, so I think one thing to keep in mind is that we talked about managed service providers, MSPs earlier, and a lot of what MSPs do today is around brokering. And I know brokering is a term that's getting used a lot, and people are a little bit skeptical about brokering. But one of the values behind brokering is that ability to determine what is the current contract that you have with the public cloud. Is it a 12-month contract, a 36-month contract? What are the complexities of the workload itself, and how does that application consume compute? How does it compute storage, and how is it measured based on cost? And so what we are working toward today, and we have the ability to be able to look at an application during that kind of portability phase of that, application portability, as well as brokering to determine what is the inflection point where hosting it in a public cloud becomes the return is minimized because you're overspending based on the contract with the public cloud, and you're better off hosting that environment on-premise, but in an on-premise cloud environment. So HPE has tools today that can give you an idea, and there actually is a calculator today. If Bobby was here, he would talk more about it, the cloud calculator, which can give you a rough idea based on an application of where that inflection point is in terms of the consumption of the resources as well as time in the environment, and to determine when you should move that application, or whether it's more cost effective to leave it public.
So the only other thing I would add to that is that if you remember back to the old virtualization days, that you could have a best location for the virtual machine kind of thing as part of virtual machine manager or some of those tools, right? And it was all out there. It is exponentially harder to be able to figure that out in the cloud. People are looking at it, and I think that's the direction that we're going to go also.
Okay, so switching gears just slightly, what happens if I'm a customer that either can't or chooses not to use OpenStack for whatever reason, or worst case, OpenStack doesn't reach escape velocity? Then what? Where does that leave you? Sounds like
Go to Franklin first.
that's incredibly limited.
Well, I guess the thing I would say is we have a variety of, wearing the broader HPE hat, we have a variety of cloud products and technologies. So it's not just, HPE's portfolio is not just OpenStack, right? So we have customers that are doing some things with OpenStack, are doing other things with Eucalyptus, and are doing possibly even other things with Microsoft Azure. Right? So it's not solely in that kind of basket. And part of it relates to the cloud economics discussion is really great. Right? There's a number of technologies that deal with this already, but the cost of switching doesn't necessarily get calculated either. So when you live, if I live just in the AWS space, right, one data center's cost in Amazon may be different than others, and I got to get stuff out of there. There's an extraction cost and there's a cost of putting it in. Moving the data has economic consequences. So when we talk about, I think your point was if OpenStack doesn't make escape velocity, what happens next, right? And for our customers, and this is why I'm going to hand it over to Mark, is let's talk about platform as a service. And when you write to Staccato, that gives you a degree of portability, which provides you a degree of insurance to be able to move from one place to another. The same thing happened in the client-server world, right? We had abstractions to allow you to not got to that.
I'll take it
it's
before
almost like a vendor lock question.
I'm gonna intercept for a second, just to give it before it goes away. Not everybody is as happy with this as I'm in the services group, but I do as much work with Microsoft Azure PAC, and right now I'm moving towards like Office 365 and other kind of Azure-related service or cloud service delivery models today as I do with Helium. So it's the Azure platform is still very active within the services group. It's a very active partner with us, and really it's directed towards people who have a high investment within the Microsoft ecosystem. So we work very well with those. We still do work today with VMware, one of our largest partners, and we do kind of virtualization, but we are doing software-defined infrastructure work with VMware today. And then again, it comes back as I'm a systems aggregator, a systems integrator, which means I have to make OpenStack work across the board with Azure. We're making it work today with other platforms as well, especially with VMware. So it's not holistically dependent, but we know there are advantages in multiple use cases. Sorry, Mark. Okay.
Security.
Okay, if nobody is asking this question.
No, go ahead. No, go.
Okay, if nobody is asking the question, Docker. I know Staccato supports Docker. The way it does is like it encapsulates Docker into Lego containers and do it. So today you announced a partnership with Docker, the company. Is there any plan to make Docker run independently of Cloud Foundry on top of any of HPE's platform, or is Cloud Foundry the only way to go?
So with the product today, that's the only way to do it. We certainly have had customers talk to us about, hey, I'd like to have a Docker hosting environment, and so we're learning more about those needs and thinking about it. But right now, that's all we have. But we definitely hear kind of the need from customers about, give me a place where I can do Docker Swarm, I should host a bunch of Docker containers. Yeah.
So we have about, 10 more minutes before we're done. If you're on the edge of your seat with a question, please raise your hand. It's been heavy duty down. There we go. That's what I'd like to see. The north side of the table. Oh, we'll send a microphone over to you. And please, I hope Angela didn't plant this question for you.
Nobody can plant a question about it.
Yeah. Let me see if I can remember it. No. We were talking a lot about economics, and if you talk to AWS and James Hamilton, and no freaking way a private cloud could possibly compete with AWS because they have, they buy in huge volume, they, blah 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 blah.
And then they market it.
And so I'm just kind of curious, since you're also in the private cloud business. Are they correct that economically, ultimately, they're going to win because as the TCO problem bubbles to the top and the differentiation between the platforms is reduced, how could private cloud possibly compete with the multi-billion-dollar AWS juggernaut?
I could just say definitively right now that there are customers running workloads on Eucalyptus private cloud that are running they are paying a price less than what the AWS public cloud is. Okay. But these are very specific instances that are designed specifically for that customer, right? When you stand up a single tenant private cloud for a customer, you know a hell of a lot about their workload, and you can build things pretty specific for that world.
Are those profitable deployments though for HPE?
Yes.
So what you're saying is you give up the flexibility and customization, the flexibility of AWS for a highly customized infrastructure, and therefore you can save some money.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't quite phrase it that way. Meaning the customer may have a set of very specific workloads, and they are trying to solve a very specific business problem, so they're not looking for a general purpose public cloud that might be doing high performance computing in one instance, might have reserved instances for HIPAA compliant applications and something else, right? So the class of workloads that they're going to run on it is somewhat understood, and the location where they want that data center may also be very specific, right? I mean, data center footprint in Tokyo is a hell of a lot more expensive than data center located in Tulsa. So it's a combination of a bunch of things. And when you can sit down directly with the customer and say, what do you specifically want to do? How do you want it to work out? It is possible to put together things that give them a degree of flexibility. Is one of the things you constrained it on is that. So I can give them a fairly flexible environment for the specific things they want to address at a price point that is often comparable, if not less than Amazon. And since I run Eucalyptus, I have to sign off on some of those deals. So yes, I know what they're looking for.
The only other thing I'd add to that too is that from the bigger picture, the 100,000 foot view, you can have total cost of ownership issues if you are a highly regulated environment, have regulatory compliance issues, and let's say that you have a very mature environment that you've already took and spent many dollars in, and so on and so forth. You may find that the TCO of taking and moving to a public cloud environment, the numbers still don't match. And if you have different auditing concerns, so on and so forth. And I'm specifically thinking of financial services organizations. The finance, before coming to HPE, I was actually part of a financial service organization oversaw their compliance, and we were regulated by 11 government agencies. And to think that as good as AWS is at trying to meet compliance concerns, and they improve daily, I know that for sure. That's not an advertisement, but that's just the truth. They're still not specific enough to be able to meet all those compliance specific things. So I would go so far as to say that someday there's going to be some kind of niche cloud that maybe does specifically on financial services stuff for big companies. I'm not trying to prognosticate or anything like that. I do see that as potentially the future. But when you look at some of those organizations that are trying to take and migrate some of their workloads to a public cloud, they do have to take those considerations in mind. Because those are considerations, again, when you're talking about the big picture, I can tell you right now that they would love to migrate to a public cloud and be done with it, but they can't. Because the cost, the overall total cost of ownership would be so much higher to do that it just doesn't make sense.